Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to give a talk on the persecution of the Christian church across the globe. I want to give you some statistics to demonstrate how bad this actually is. In the Middle East, in places like Palestine, only 1.5% of the population identify as Christian. In Palestine, if you look at places like Iraq, they used to have 1.5 million Christians in Iraq. Now, only 120,000 or so identify as Christians in Iraq. That's a tenfold decrease. Why was there a tenfold decrease in the number of Christians in Iraq? That's from 2003 to now. Christians have just been absolutely eradicated in places in the Middle East.
The U.S. is responsible for 6 million deaths over the past 20 years. That's the estimate. That's the number. Can you even process that number? It makes me dizzy. 1 million direct killings and 5 million indirect killings, which is like when our military blows up the entire water system of a village and then all the kids die because they're drinking out of old shoes. This country's not just a murderer. We're a fucking serial killer. We're a Hannibal Lecter with a fucking Yankee Doodle Dandy three-cornered hat on. What in the...
Most of the time is Islamic extremists that they will actively attack us. But I want you to understand that if they weren't attacking the Christians, they would be attacking the atheists. And the atheists and the agnostics are the ones who are next.
President Obama has made another call for tighter gun control following the shooting at an abortion clinic in Colorado, which left 3 people dead. Police say the gunman was a 57-year-old man who gave himself up after a shootout with police.
Well, if you don't stand with the church, there will be no one left to stand with you if the church ever dies through this persecution. So take a stand. Say, I will not tolerate this. Talk about the Christians that are being massacred in places like Nigeria.
Wait a minute!
In 1974, Nigeria was the 3rd largest oil-producing nation in the world. Today, Nigeria does not own its own oil reserves, which is still the 3rd largest in the world, but BP and Shell and Exxon owns all the rights of the oil in Nigeria. They take the oil out of it, and after that they sell it back to the Nigerian government. Who did that? The IMF and the World Bank. These are the Kafirs we're dealing with.
It is Christophobic attacks in places like Nigeria, in places like the Middle East, in places like Palestine, in places like Afghanistan, in places like Bangladesh, in places like Pakistan. These are areas where Christians are constantly under attack. Think of your brothers, either in faith or in humanity in Afghanistan, who have had to go into hiding because the Taliban has forced them underground.
Tonight, newly released documents raise serious questions about whether the American people were lied to about the progress of the war in Afghanistan, the longest in our history.
A massive new trove of confidential documents obtained by the Washington Post reveals U.S. officials systematically lied to the American public about the Afghan war, virtually since the beginning, 18 years ago. The objective? To conceal widespread fears that America was losing.
The rosy picture that's been painted by our political and military leadership is not the real picture on the ground.
It's as blunt as can be. We didn't know what we were doing.
We didn't know exactly why we were there or how we could get out, and not a soul could define victory.
Retired General Douglas Lute, the Afghan war czar, saying in 2015, "What are we trying to do here? We didn't have the foggiest notion of what we were undertaking."
We didn't have a strategy. We didn't even know who the enemy was. Who were we there to fight?
People, we make this commitment. The conflict will not be the end. We will not walk away.
Thanks to our military and our allies and the brave fighters of Afghanistan, the Taliban regime is coming to an end.
We've destroyed an enormous amount of the military infrastructure of the Taliban.
The days of the Taliban are over.
Yes, the Taliban have got time, but their game of waiting is a game that will not succeed.
These Afghans searched for dead bodies after a US airstrike hit a wedding party. 35 civilians were killed and 38 injured. The bride is among the injured in Kandahar Hospital, along with other women and children.
There was no question of us withdrawing our British troops.
And as Commander-in-Chief, I have determined that it is in our vital national interest to send an additional 30,000 U.S. troops to Afghanistan.
a US operation in western Afghanistan killed some 90 civilians. The US, at first, denied that any civilians had been killed.
I have two words for you: Predator drones. You will never see it coming.
Listen to this 13-year-old Pakistani boy whose grandmother was killed in a drone strike.
I no longer love blue skies. In fact, I now prefer gray skies. The drones do not fly when the skies are gray, and for a short period of time, the mental tension and fear eases.
This war has taken longer than most anticipated. But over the last 3 years, the tide has turned. We broke the Taliban's momentum.
I think this country is a vast improvement on what we found in 2001, and I think our troops can leave with their heads held high over a job very well done. Nigeria and Afghanistan, possibly the two most corrupt countries.
We will be deploying an additional 440 personnel to NATO's Resolute Support mission in Afghanistan.
There's anger and confusion on this pine nut farm. The drone strike came when workers were resting after a day's work.
Don't the Americans see that they were just working and gathering pine nuts? Why do they attack ordinary workers?
The Taliban wants to make a deal.
There is no military path to victory for the Taliban.
Your own intelligence community has assessed that the Afghan government will likely collapse.
That's not true.
The Taliban declared the war in Afghanistan was over on Monday after they took control of the presidential palace in the capital, Kabul.
Seeing the sacrifices we've made as British soldiers, for it just to go up in smoke in a couple of weeks, you've just got to question, was it worth it? And for me, at the moment, for many of my friends messaging me, I don't think it was.
We were told we were fighting terrorists. The real terrorist was me, and the real terrorism is this occupation. Poor and working people in this country are sent to kill poor and working people in another country to make the rich richer. And without racism, soldiers would realize that they have more in common with the Iraqi people than they do with the billionaires who send us to war.
These things are important because this church, the church of the Christians, the radical church that makes a stand against this extremism, is under attack.
Wait a minute!
The church of the Christians, the radical church that makes a stand against this extremism, is under attack.
And if that church fails, then the rest of humanity will fail with it.
Stop it. Get some help.